Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Adi Klevit here with the System Simplified podcast, where we interview top entrepreneurs, founders, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And this podcast is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group. At Business Success Consulting Group, we create custom processes and tailor-made business systems so businesses can thrive and grow. All right, and today's guest is Daleele Alison. Hi, Daleele.
Hello.
Great to have you here. And Daleele is the co-founder and CEO of RooksDM, which is a technology consulting company where they help small to medium-sized businesses find the right technology tools and implement them. And that's why I'm so excited to have you on, Daleele, because we're going to talk all about systems, automation, and how they integrate, how you actually have to integrate automation tools in order to create good systems in your business. Yep. And we're also going to talk about how to consolidate, because I'm sure if, many of our listeners, and I will confess, also myself, we have all these different tools that we like, that we feel like it helps us in terms of automation, but at some point it just becomes too much, right? And we are using different tools for different things, and some of them are redundant, but then we use just one aspect of that as opposed and one aspect of the other where we can actually consolidate it. So you're going to give us tips and advice on how to consolidate. And we're also going to hear tips from you on what tools specifically to use. So you're going to give us like a laundry list, right, of the tools that you suggest that we use in order to automate businesses. So with that, one more thing. Daleele is not only the co-founder and the CEO of RooksDM, but he's such an amazing networker and a connector. So he also even start it's the coffee. Remind me the name of the networking group that you started for coffee lovers.
Local Coffee Shy.
Local Coffee Shy. And you have to be in Chicago in order to be part
Correct.
of it, right?
Yeah. So it's a local Chicago group, but yes.
All right. So if you're in Chicago right now and you're listening to us, so definitely check it out. And another thing is that I would love to give a shout out to Jeremy Wise from Rise 25, who is also in Illinois, and he's the one who introduced us. So thank you, Jeremy. And Jeremy and John from Rise 25, they are producing this podcast that you're listening to. So they're amazing. Check them out, Rise 25. And with that, with all the introductions and the shout outs, and now the listeners know what they're going to be listening to. Daleele, great to have you again.
Thank you.
Did I miss anything that you want to tell the listeners first about yourself?
No, I think you covered it spot on. So thank you.
Awesome. You're very welcome. So let's just jump into it. Automation and systematization. So what is your view in terms of where does automation come into play in a business that want to systematize?
Correct. So good question. That comes into play usually in the processes, right? So what we look at are their processes that you and your team are doing over and over again as they relate to tasks. So if you think about a task that a team member or department or an organization is constantly doing over and over again, there's a standard procedure for that. And of that procedure, then we look at where are there opportunities to, first and foremost, streamline it. So if it's taking you 30 minutes to get through those procedures, can we get through it in 15 minutes? Or secondly, is there an opportunity to automate it entirely? So instead of having someone do something manually, is there the opportunity for us to leverage technology to be able to automate that from start to finish? So you go, and I'm using the example 30 minutes. It could be an hour, it could be more or less, but I like to use the example of 30 minutes. And then we ask the question, can we get down to 15 minutes? Can we get down to 10 minutes? Or can we get down to 0 minutes if possible? Because the automation piece allows you to get more time back in your day so you can focus on high value, high impact activities versus some of the things you have to do, but not necessarily have to do manually. And that's really where technology can come in, is figuring out, hey, out of my processes, just asking the question, is there an opportunity for me to be more efficient? Because that's what our organization is focused around, is how do we make you as efficient as possible? And how we do that is by leveraging technology to increase efficiency throughout your organization. So
I love it. And that's exactly right. That's why I love collaborating with professionals like yourself, because, we go in there and we document the processes, the procedures, we find areas of inefficiencies that we can decrease, like you said, hopefully from 30 minutes to 15 minutes, right? Find those areas of that. How can we be more? So there's always people and processes, right? So how we can increase efficiency. But once we have done that, how can we automate it? And that's where you come into play in terms of like all the automation tools that you have. And I know you are the expert in terms of, I can show you a process and you go, okay, this tool will do this and this tool will do that. Or no, you know what, this one we can't, because you're also very good at that in terms of like, this is something that has to be manually, but usually you can find an automation tool. So that is where I feel like, your expertise and saving time in terms of like figuring out, well, I got an ad for that tool or that tool, or my friend is using this one, or my coworker recommended that one. That's why they have to go to an expert like yourself, where you can look at the process once it's documented and go, okay, you can use this tool or that tool, and this tool and that tool will do this and that.
yes,
that will save you time, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I think you bring up a great point. It's not necessarily about the tool; it's more about how does the tool enable your process to be efficient? Because sometimes you mentioned a great point with all the emails, or like you talk to your friend and they're using this awesome tool, and then you go down the rabbit hole of like, hey, I really want to implement this because it's a cool new tool and I think it would be beneficial. But the tool, and we always say this within our organization, and that's why partners like yourself are very valuable to us, because we say process first, technology second. So unless you're a technology business and your whole core business is around technology that you're offering to the market, then the technology is only there to enable your business to be more efficient, not your business itself. And some people, and sometimes what we see over and over again is organizations or teams or individuals will get lost in that and be like, oh, I have this problem, let me just throw some technology at it, where necessarily it might not be a technology issue, it might be an organizational issue, it might be a process inefficiency issue, it might be something outside of technology. So starting with technology first and saying, hey, I'm going to throw this at my problem is usually not the right approach, which is why we always collaborate with people like yourself to say, hey, what's your process today? How do you work? What are you trying to actually execute? How does it flow from start to finish? And then we ask the question of, where does technology help streamline or automate the processes and what that looks like? Because that's the secondary discussion. The first discussion is truly understanding what it is you're trying to solve for. And like I said, how we solve for problems is leveraging technology to automate and streamline processes. But what we're solving for is business challenges, business problems that you're looking to overcome that's hindering you from growth, or costing you more money, or wasting more time because it's being inefficient. That's what we're trying to solve for. And the how is just picking the right technology solutions or the right technologies that are available that are out there.
Exactly. And, throughout my podcast, if my listeners already know it, I really emphasize the importance of hiring professionals and just delegate, right? Delegate and hire the right professional, seek professional advice when you can. And that's why also we can also make less of the fact of all your knowledge, all your experience. You can come and look and say, okay, this tool and that tool and that tool. And then you and your team can actually implement that tool where
Correct.
it actually creates the results. So then the process is not just this, bright idea of like, yeah, let's automate that part. And then you go, well, where am I going to allocate 20 hours or 40 hours and with no expertise how to do that?
Yeah.
That's where it just basically speeds things up tremendously.
Correct. Yeah. And that's where we add the most value. Like I said, our level of expertise of having delivered technology solutions across all types of organizations. And more importantly, we usually cut all of our projects typically start with an assessment. So that's where we come in and we get the big picture view of what's going on, either within a department or within an organization, if you're a smaller company. And we'll say, hey, let's talk about your challenges. What does that look like? Let's assess them. And through those conversations, we can sometimes start earmarking solutions, but we don't jump to the solution first. We try to dissect the problem, what's actually going on. And then just from our expertise, we're able to on the fly, and then as we continue the conversation, be able to start seeing things that we can implement that would increase efficiency sooner rather than later.
For sure. So now let's talk about specific tools. Okay, so give us some, and again, it's with that caveat of like, you have to figure out your processes first. You have to make sure that tool makes sense within your environment, your ecosystem, which you're going to talk as well in terms of how to consolidate. But let's run through some of your favorite tools.
Yes. So I'll generalize it as to like categories. If you can start with categories first. So first and foremost, I think every organization should have a CRM, customer relationship management tool, and that's usually can be the first point of data entry, and that's important for automation and streamlining of processes because you have to think about how data is going to flow from start to finish. So in this example, if you're a professional service organization, let's just say a law firm, right? Having a CRM is very valuable because if I reach out to you and say, Adi, you run this awesome law firm, I'm interested in hiring you to help me with some contracts and things of that nature. The first question you want to ask is, how are you capturing that intake? And then CRM can help with that. So what we've seen in the past, you can use forms from the CRM. So one is HubSpot, for example. So that's a great CRM that's free. There's Salesforce, and then there's also industry specific ones. So if you think of like Lawmatics, for example, is very industry specific to law firms, and it's a CRM that ties directly to assisting law firms. Or if you're in financial services, you can think of Redtel, which is another. But that's the first category of technology that I would probably say to start with, because it's usually the first data entry point of an outside consumer reaching out to your service, to your business saying, hey, I'm interested in services. And there's a bunch of different ones that we recommend. So I mentioned HubSpot, Salesforce. If you're in legal, there's Lawmatics. If you're in financial services, it's Redtail. There's some others out there as well. But I think it's important to notate a few different things, which even before you think about those type of tools, you want to take an inventory and say, hey, what technologies am I using today? Because integrations are key there. And so to my example, once again, if you're a law firm, for example, you might be using you probably are using a practice management system, which is how you manage your cases. So you might want to think about, okay, if I do decide, let's say you don't have a CRM and you're deciding on implementing one thing you want to take into consideration that would be a major consideration is, how does it integrate with your practice management system? Because then that's where you get the value of streamlining and automating processes. If you can take data from one system and have it systematically go into another. And you can do that. There's first party integrations. So for example, like Lawmatics has a first party integration with a practice management system called Smokeball. So then you reach out to the law firm, you provide some data, we capture that in the CRM, which is Lawmatics, and then you port it over into the practice management system systematically because of that integration. So that's the first category.
No, it's a great point that you brought about the CRM. CRM is obviously, it organizes, your sales pipeline, right? I mean, it goes from all the way to lead to sale, and then you can also maintain the identities that are there. You can maintain them, and you can actually follow through, and you can see the email correspondence, and you can see the history. But it's also, what you brought up is a great point in terms of, like, if you want to automate, right, you have to capture the data into a CRM. So from there you can have automatic marketing campaigns or drip campaigns or whatever it is, and also integration with whatever system you're using in order to manage the rest of the organization, the production part of the organization. So it's kind of like your gateway of anybody that comes in, any prospect, new prospect lead, then becomes a client. They have to go through the CRM because that's like your main database that you can from there automate. So that was a great point. And yeah,
exactly. Yeah, no, spot on. And then you can do a lot of things in the CRM as well too. Now that you have the data there, you can move it from one system to another, and also you can generate reports. So as you're managing your sales pipeline, you can see what opportunities are out there, what's closed, what hasn't closed, and you can kind of gather data from that to either report on or make better decisions as a business owner or business leader moving forward.
And that's a key. It's really, you have to ask yourself, like, why am I automating, right? I mean, you can automate in order to increase efficiency, but it's also in order to make better decisions, in order to be faster at managing the business, right? In order to have transparency. And I cannot agree more. I mean, I've seen several clients that started without CRM. They integrated the CRM, and it's definitely changed their business because now they were able to buy that precious time of actually working on the business and not in the business. And it gave better clarity and better ability to look what's actually happening. So very good.
Exactly.
So CRM, great. What's the next tool?
CRM is and then the second one I would categorize them into like collaboration. So project management tool is usually a big one that we see, and we internally use a tool called ClickUp.
Me too. I use ClickUp. Yes. But a lot of my clients, I also use, Monday or Asana. Monday is awesome. Asana is amazing. So all of them are really, really good. And definitely, I highly recommend a task management tool.
Yeah, and those are valuable because then that provides, you're familiar with it. You mentioned, yep, Monday.com, Asana is another one. There's also like Trello. So it depends on your needs once again, is what are you looking to accomplish? We go back to that question quite a bit. So it depends on your needs, but ClickUp is phenomenal because it has a lot of functionality and capabilities in regards to managing both internal and client projects. So us as a company, Rooks, we use ClickUp and we use it for both our internal projects. So if you think about, I do a lot of speaking events and podcasts, we have a marketing space. And in that space, we have a list of activities that we need to execute on. So for this specific podcast, we have some pre-booked activities. We have some post-event activities that need to get executed on. And from that, what we're able to do, a few different things. We're able to automate the tasks that need to happen, and we're able to auto-assign them. So within ClickUp, which I'm sure you're probably using, are templates. So we can create a template on a task, and based off that task, we can create subtasks and assign them to various people. So now once I say, hey, I'm booked for this podcast, I create the actual task. And then once I move it to the status as booked, it'll trigger all those subtasks to get executed on, and it'll disperse the task to the appropriate team members. So now I know, hey, my marketing team will go ahead and do like a social media push, and they'll do it before and after. And then there'll be certain activities that don't get lost through the cracks. But more importantly, I don't have to spend the effort of reaching out to marketing, letting them know, hey, this is coming up. Please make sure you do this, that, the other, and vice versa. They would be able to automatically know, hey, Daleele, you just got booked for this one. We need an image, or we need something to be able to post on social so we can do a push for this. So that saves so much time, and it
Absolutely.
makes things not
And
fall.
and also the internal communication is amazing in terms of, like, when you have a task on ClickUp or Monday or Asana, instead of having to send emails back and forth, because like for me, I eliminated any internal emails. I mean, my team knows that. They know
Nice.
that there is we don't send emails internally. If let's say, for instance, I get an external email asking me to do something, and actually I want to assign it to one of my team members, I will forward that email to ClickUp, and
Yep.
then they will take it from there. Or if we want to chat with each other, or about a task, it's all on ClickUp, and it's so super organized that I was able to onboard 2 new members just recently, and they were like, wow, this is so organized, and they were up to speed very, very fast. And
Very
the
fast.
communication lines are amazing. So I agree with you. That is absolutely a must, to have some kind of a task management system.
Yeah, and it gives you the holistic view. So you bring up a good point too. You can see on a task everything that was done, who did it, what the comments are, what the activities were. You could track it very simple to say for the most part. And you're an expert user, right? Because you talked about, hey, you get an email, and what do you do? So you have a process that you define. Okay, this email comes in. No, it won't be an email. Let's get it right into ClickUp. So then that way you can kind of track it so everyone can see it, and then also kind of assign what needs to happen after you receive the note. So very, very smart on your end to be able to streamline and automate some of those processes.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And we can probably have like a whole show on how we use that, because I definitely refine it every single time, because I also help my clients with it. I mean, I have many clients on Monday or Sana or ClickUp, but it's, in order to be efficient, in order to have a good process, you have to have the task management. So I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, just to add to that, so you bring up a good point too of refinement. So it's not this set it and forget it model. It's usually you're asking the question too periodically, and it might be on a sequence. So maybe every quarter, every year, whatever it may be, that you're asking the questions like, hey, is this working for us? And there's nuances that come up too. That's another challenge that we see, is people try to solve for 100% of the issue, but it's like, hey, what are the top possibilities that could happen, and let's solve for those. And the ones that fall outside of it, maybe we do it manual, or maybe there's a secondary process that we can think about implementing, but for now we just keep it manual. So that's something to always ask the question, and I like your point on refinement as well.
Absolutely. That's a great point, Daleele. What's the next topic? What's the next subject of automation tool?
So not necessarily, it does fall into automation, but to your point, is how do you use your collaboration tools? So email, file sharing, chat communication. We spend a lot of times with clients trying to understand what the structure is for how they use certain things. So in your organization, for example, you say, hey, I'm eliminating email. Any email needs to go into my task management system. And that works for you and your team, and you have a structure around it. So it's important that you as an organization determine how you're using each of these systems, specifically as it relates to collaboration, because you'll have a lot of wasted time in regards to a lot of people are sending emails instead of using chat, or either they're not storing the documents in the right location. So we might be working on a project together. You get an email, you never upload it into the project repository, so I never see the notes, or the document that you received. So I might waste all this time doing research or not realizing you have the answers that I need to be able to move my tasks forward because it wasn't properly shared with me. So we spend a lot of time. We do a lot of the work that we do is in the Microsoft stack. So we are Microsoft partners as well. So we're always looking at like Outlook is obviously the email provider, and then you have Teams. So we look at Teams for collaboration as it relates to internal. How do you create a Teams environment that allows you to easily and efficiently be able to collaborate with one another? Because within Teams, you have multiple channels that you can use, and you have multiple teams that you can create. The problem is, how do you figure out what the structure is, and how do you determine what goes where? And us as an organization, we've kind of, to your point with refinement, we've tried a few different things that's worked. Some hasn't worked as well, but we're continuing to iterate on it. And now we have a better process in regards to, okay, we use Teams at this capacity. We put files here. We have a folder structure for the projects that we operate. And we know if we need something, this is where we look for it. So I think that's an important element as well, too, is the collaboration of chat versus email versus where documents are getting stored. And outside of Teams, too, there's tons of different collaboration. So some people are on G Suite as well. So you can use G Suite for email provider. There's Slack for instant messenger that we know a lot of organizations use. It just depends on what your process is for that, and then determining the right tools moving forward.
Absolutely. You know, I personally, in my organization, we use Slack, but many of my clients use Teams, so I'm on their teams, right? So Teams is basically like Slack. It's for those of our listeners that are not familiar, but it's a Microsoft product. It's an excellent product that allow internal chat and communication. But you know, Daleele, one of the things that I find, and it happened to us too until we got it, it's again through refinement, get it organized, is that one of the things that can happen is that people put all kind of communications on direct messaging each other, right?
Yep.
And that can just clogs it, right? But you know, it is a communication line, and it is a line where communication is like a phone line, right? So communication goes through. So if let's say we work in the same organization, and I direct message you all the time, but I also direct message you, the picture from the birthday party for my son yesterday. I'm also messaging you like this important contract from a client, and then I message you a bright idea I have. It just all jams, and then you can't communicate anymore because you're going to stop looking at my messages, right?
Yes.
So to your point, creating all those tools, Teams and Slack, has the ability to create different channels of communication. So as an example, like with my assistant, we decided that the direct messaging, which she messages me directly, is something that I have to see right away, like something that is going to happen in the next hour, and I need to see it because it will pop up on my screen, and I know, oh yeah, okay, I only have 30 minutes because my appointment is early, or my next appointment is delayed, whatever it is. But for regular communication that I can reply within 24 hours, we have a channel which is called a DSM, regular communication. Her name is Samantha, so it's regular communication. And she puts her answers there, I answer, etc. It's just better. Or then you can create, let's say with a client, when we collaborate on a specific project and there are specific people to collaborate on that project, we add all of them to the channel and then we communicate back and forth. And like, that's where like what you discuss in terms of like you coming in and figure it out. How is the communication working? What do you use it for? What are your needs? That's priceless, because that is when those tools are going to work. If somebody says those tools don't work for me, well, then the question is, like, how did you try to apply it, and how can we make it work?
Yeah, and you bring up a second good point, which is the change management component, which we help out with a lot, providing training, and then to have the structure, right, to have everyone agree, hey, this is what we're planning to implement as an organization moving forward. And you're not going to have, depending on how large your organization is, you might not have every single team member involved. So if they're not involved with the project, they might miss some things. So it's important that you have the change management component as well, to providing the right resources, providing the right training, providing the right, we call them a champion or super user, to be able to help anyone that's having challenges overcome those challenges, because now we have a set of parameters or procedures that we've agreed upon that we want to implement throughout the organization. So you can increase your adoption percentage that way and remove some of the friction.
Wonderful. So we covered CRM, we covered task management, we covered the communication, right? So it will be basically like a platform to collaborate, because it's not just communication, but it's also a platform to collaborate because you can share files, you can share different resources, all of those, I think, I know they can also be done in the task management, so you have to decide which one to use, right?
Yep.
So I think those are the main ones. We talked before the show a little bit about managing your time and in terms of managing your calendar and having like automatic tools to do that. And, those are also tools that are available.
Yep. Yeah. So the booking, so that's a really popular discussion that we've been having over the last, I want to say over a year now, but the booking tools have become very popular amongst people, and the Calendly is one of them. So Calendly is what we use internally as well. But once again, going back to the point of like redundancy, or maybe looking at technology that you already have that you can implement even further. If you're on Microsoft, once again, Microsoft has bookings. So one of the questions you can ask there is, hey, can I use Microsoft Bookings to be able to do some of my calendar scheduling? And we've talked with clients about that, and it works for them, and it makes sense for them to set it up. There's also like Acuity as another one that we see that's very popular. But those tools really, really do help with a lot of things. And it's a simple thing to save a lot of time on. But once again, you have to put the time up front to be able to get the gains on the back end. Because if I just go and say, hey, I'm gonna sign up for a Calendly account and I'm just going to use a link to schedule meetings systematically, you'll run into a lot of issues. So one of the things that you have to go through is the exercise to say, hey, let me block my days out. What does my week look like as I'm thinking about scheduling these meetings? Am I a sales leader? If that's the case, then you want to spend majority of your time selling, right? And having conversations with people or maybe your team members. So you have to figure out how to leverage the tool for your needs specifically. And that incorporates kind of some of the work that I would imagine you do as well too, is like, what's the process here? What do we have to go through so we can create some sort of structure before we implement the tool? But yes, calendar automation tools are phenomenal. And you can even look at too, I mentioned HubSpot. So they have like a bookings page, right? So if it's a sales activity, you can use HubSpot, and they have an opportunity for you to kind of coordinate some of that bookings as well too. So just figuring out what you're looking to use it for and what technologies you currently have, and seeing if they have the functionality for scheduling automation, or if you have to look outside of it, that's an option as well too.
Absolutely. And I use Calendly, I use ClickUp, as I said, I use different systems where all of them actually have a calendar built in, right? I use Pipedrive for my CRM, so I can also book through there. So what I'm trying to get at is that we have a lot of options. And
Yes.
you can't really use the calendar. I'm not going to use the calendar here and here and here and here, because it's going to be then too much. And that's where, I'd like to talk about our next topic, which is basically how do we consolidate? Because at some point, and if you do this little exercise and you see how many subscriptions you actually have, oh, this is only $4 a month, and this is only $8 a month. Oh, and this, I'm going to try this tool. It's only $10 a month. And then you go through all the only $10 a month, you probably can even get to $1,000. Well, maybe I'm exaggerating, but you could. So, the question is, how do we consolidate? What are some of the tips and advices you can give us and our listeners here?
Yeah.
Like, how do we actually create a system that works? Can you use G Suite for your email and then use Microsoft, or should we stick to one or the other? What are some of the good advice or tips that you can give us on that?
Yeah, and I like your point. So you bring up a great point, as like the licensing costs adds up, right? And one of the things that we focus on is scalability. So we work with a lot of growing firms. So if they're at 10 people and they're paying for 10 licenses, that's probably a little bit more manageable. Maybe it might be a little bit restrictive, but once you start to grow and double in size and you get to 20 and 30, then you really want to focus on that, because not only is it a licensing issue that you're paying for every month or every year, you're also having to pay for the time commitment of that, switching between systems, training people to use them accordingly, onboarding them, offboarding them. So if you have people coming and leaving your organization, that takes someone to manage that, and time and effort. And sometimes it can go missing through the cracks, right? So you might have someone that's on a system that needs no access today, or you might have someone that is just onboarding and you want to get them access up to speed. So that's a really good point that you bring up, and I want to kind of call that out, which is great. And then back to your point, the way that we run our projects and in our assessment, we do this as well too. First and foremost is you just document your inventory. So if you've been in business for a while, what you say is, hey, let me put together a spreadsheet. And we do this with our clients. Sometimes they don't have them documented, right? They just know, hey, I'm using I have Adobe Sign here, and then I'm using Salesforce here, and then I'm using that and this and the other, but there's no true inventory of the systems that they're using throughout the organization. And we go all the way down to like, tell me every single system you're using that you're paying for and that you're not paying for. If it's free, that's something to take into consideration because there's a time effort associated with that as well too. So first and foremost, I would say document your current inventory, what you have, what you need. I can send you to, we have a very basic sheet that we send out to our clients. It's an Excel sheet and we have them fill it out. And what we're looking for is the name of the system, the price that they're paying, the number of users, and that gives us a sense of, hey, we can quickly look at that and say, hey, are there any redundancies here? To your point, hey, do you have Google and Microsoft, both subscriptions for that? We ask the question, why? It might make sense. There might be some specific reasons that you want to use both platforms, but we might challenge it, or we might say, "Hey, it's probably more advantageous to consolidate to Google or to Microsoft because it can give you everything you need plus more." And like I said, you get the time efficiency gains by doing that because now it's one platform under the same system, so you don't have to spend as much money on integrations potentially, as well as like any custom development. And your users are experienced with the platform as a whole, so the user experience will be kind of intuitive for them moving forward. So that's one way to look at it: is start with the inventory, what you have, document it. And then from there, you kind of have to ask the question is what's limited? Like, what am I missing in terms of the functionality that I need with the systems that I already have? Because then you'll be able to determine what's missing, or either we can help you walk through that process of, it's not necessarily missing. You have the system in place. You're just not leveraging the functionality of it as a whole. So that's where the discussion happens a lot of times with our clients once we go through the inventory list.
I think it's a great idea. And I think it's not just doing this. This exercise is amazing, just doing the inventory. And yeah, send me the spreadsheet and I'm going to include it in the notes for the podcast so anybody can download and use it. And there is the point, you do the inventory, but then you need to have expert advice of like, what am I missing? Because you have much more knowledge than I do in terms of, because that's what you do for a living. So you have the information. You keep yourself informed and you go, well, there is a tool that you're actually missing here that can do this and this and that, if that's the functionality of why you are doing it, right? Or exactly. These two tools are redundant. We can actually take this one and make it do what the other one does. So you kind of like clean house, you consolidate, and you have the discipline not to just sign up for the next amazing shiny object tool, right? But just like, okay, let's have the discipline of really have a plan. So really, Daleele, what I hear throughout this conversation, which was amazing and so much data, I learned so much today, is that you really have to have a process. You have to have a plan. And that's why really we are talking about it in order to systematize. You have to have a system. And you have to make sure that the technology actually accomplishes what you want in terms of the systematization. And it's not just like one more thing added, but it all works together correctly so you can actually accomplish the final product, right?
100%. And that's what I was getting ready to add to too, that's part of our assessment, right? We walk you through that whole journey. And one of the most important considerations that we take into account is the integrations. So how do all those systems play well with each other? Because you're definitely going to have multiple systems. You can't have everything consolidated in this one masterpiece. You might have a lot of apps within one masterpiece, like a Microsoft or a Google, but there are going to be other additional systems that you have to use that support your business. And the one question that we ask is, how do those play together? And what are some opportunities for us to integrate them? And that goes back to my point from earlier. Is there a first party integration, or is that, and that's once again, you mentioned hiring experts, and that's where we can kind of come in to let you know what your options are for being able to create those integrations. So it might be something that's out of the box that needs limited configuration is what we call it. The second one that we do a lot of work around is through open APIs. So we can build something custom that's a connector from one system to another that solves your specific need. So then those two systems are connected, and now you have so much efficiency within your process because we were able to connect them to work together. And then the third one, obviously, is if you want to build something custom from the ground up, you can do that. We usually try to find the exact reason as to why you would build something custom, because it's costly, and then that requires a lot of system maintenance, a lot of requirements, and then obviously a lot of adoption. And moving forward, you want to be able to maintain it is the most important thing there, because there's infrastructure costs and things associated with it. So that's, to your point, a very good conversation or a very good point, I should say.
Absolutely. So those 3 points are great. And if our listeners would like to contact you, what's the best way of contacting you?
Yeah, so the best, I would suggest sign up for our newsletter. So if you go to our website, rooksdm.com, you can sign up for our newsletter. That'll put you on the mailing list. You'll get a lot of technology tips and tricks. We post content every month. And then the other one is if you want to reach out to me directly, more than happy to provide a free 1-hour consultation for anyone listening. You can go to my, you can book it through the website. So rooksdm.com, click on the contact page and fill out the form, or you can connect with me directly on LinkedIn. So Daleele Alison obviously is where I'm at on LinkedIn. Just send me a LinkedIn request and I'll be happy to connect with you there.
How awesome and how generous. I mean, absolutely take advantage of it. I would recommend everyone take advantage because we all have different systems. And if nothing else, find out how you can integrate, or what are you missing, or are you doing it? Do you have too much, too little? I mean, I definitely book up that our consultation with Daleele and fill out the spreadsheet that I'm going to include in the podcast notes. And what a great resource. Thank you so much, Daleele. It was great having you on this podcast. The information you provided is absolutely amazing and very easy to, I think I walked out of here with new tools that I'm going to try, or new advice, and I'm sure our listeners as well. So thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me. This was a great conversation. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.